I think the thing that, when I think about Como, is bravery, right?
This Cesc Fàbregas Como is scarier than we thought. They aren't a nice story anymore. They're a systems team, the kind that wins games before the first tackle because the opponent is already solving problems they don't understand yet.
Well, we've been talking a couple weeks, Poppy. We love the way this team plays. I mean, this is cut in the mold of Cesc Fàbregas and the way that he played, right?
Look at the evidence. 6th in Serie A with 45 points after 26 games, sitting 1 point off 5th and doing it with a goal difference that screams control, not chaos. They average around 62% possession across the season, not as decoration, but as a weapon to suffocate momentum and decide when the match gets played. They went to Naples, absorbed pressure at the Maradona, and reached a Coppa Italia semi-final for the first time in 4 decades. Now here's where it turns serious, because in Turin against Juventus, a club built on control, patience and historical authority, Como didn't survive. They dictated a 2-0 win away from home that didn't feel chaotic, it felt rehearsed. And that's exactly why this isn't about one big result. This is about a promoted team that now plays with the tactical clarity of a European contender. This is exactly why Serie A and the rest of Europe should be worried.
I think the message is clear. We are here to keep winning games, to keep growing as a team, as a club, and that's it.
When people talk about Como 1907 now, they talk about possession numbers, expected goals models, and European qualification scenarios. 2 years ago, they were talking about survival. That gap between survival and structural control is the real story, because this didn't start with a transfer window. It didn't start with a lucky, unbeaten run. It didn't even start with a big speech in a dressing room. It started quietly when Cesc Fàbregas chose to begin his coaching journey inside Como's youth structure in 2023. Not as a headline appointment, not as a celebrity figurehead, but as a builder. Como secured promotion to Serie A in 2023/24, finishing second in Serie B. On paper, it reads like momentum. In reality, it was alignment. Even before becoming first-team head coach, Fàbregas was influencing training standards, positional discipline, and the club's internal language around the game. The aim wasn't just to go up, it was to go up ready. Promotion teams usually rely on emotional surges, defensive compactness, and transitional chaos. Como were different. Their build-up was structured, their spacing was rehearsed, their midfield rotations were deliberate. Those habits didn't appear overnight. They were planted months earlier. When Fàbregas worked with Como's youth and B setup, it wasn't symbolic, it was strategic. Youth environments are where you define how centre-backs receive under pressure, how midfielders scan before turning, how fullbacks position during build-up, and how pressing lines stay connected. He wasn't teaching intensity first, he was teaching recognition. That matters because when he eventually stepped into senior responsibility, he wasn't introducing ideas, he was reinforcing them. He didn't need to change the club's thinking. He had already shaped it. In July 2024, Como handed Fàbregas a 4-year contract. That detail gets overlooked. Clubs afraid of relegation don't offer long-term philosophical backing. They hedge, they protect themselves, they keep options open. A 4-year deal says something different. We are committing to a way of playing, not just a league position, and that distinction changes everything. In 2024/25, Como finished 10th in Serie A. For most newly promoted clubs, 10th is overachievement. For context, promoted sides usually hover between 14th and 20th, fighting volatility week to week. But the more important detail wasn't the final ranking. It was the performance profile they built from the back against elite pressing sides. They maintained possession in hostile stadiums. They conceded fewer high-quality chances than typical promoted teams. They didn't abandon structure when trailing. That season wasn't about fireworks, it was about proof of concept. Could the ideas survive top-flight pressure? Yes, and once that question was answered, the project shifted from survival to ambition. This is the critical point most people missed. Fàbregas didn't build this current Como by chasing wins. He built it by standardizing behaviors. Midfield triangles always available, rest defense in place before attacking risk, high pressing triggered by body orientation, not emotion. Patience in circulation until a numerical advantage appears. These are habits, and habits are what travel. Home, away, big club, small club. When you build habits first, results follow more consistently than people expect. That's why the current season doesn't feel like a leap. It feels like the second phase of something that was already structurally sound. He didn't build a team, he built habits. And habits, once embedded, don't disappear under pressure. If you want to know whether Como are overperforming, you don't start with vibes. You start with repeatable indicators, the kind that survive bad finishing, survive bad luck, survive a tough schedule. And right now, Como's profile reads less like a promoted club enjoying a hot run, and more like a European-level structure. After 26 matches, Como are 6th in Serie A with 45 points. And importantly, they're sitting right in the traffic of the traditional powers. League standings show them directly behind Juventus in 5th. That matters because by late February, the table stops lying. You don't accidentally hang around the European places with 26 games of evidence. Como are operating at roughly 61% possession, and not in the we pass it sideways way, in the we decide where the game is played way. Statistical tracking has them as the top possession team in Serie A this season. That's a massive identity marker, because in Italy, possession usually belongs to the giants. Inter, Milan, Napoli. Como are forcing themselves into that conversation. Now the part that kills the overperforming argument. Season data lists Como at 42.38 expected goals created, 25.35 expected goals conceded, with 41 goals scored and 19 conceded after 26 matches. That's the blueprint of a top side. You create enough chances to win games on normal finishing. You concede few enough chances that one bad moment doesn't break you. They're not winning off miracle goals and goalkeeper heroics alone. They're winning because the shot quality trend is on their side most weeks. Their attacking volume supports it. 373 shots, 132 on target season to date. That's not a counterpunching team. That's a team that lives in the opponent's half and keeps coming back with second and third waves. And the defensive layer is the real, this is serious moment. Juventus is on 12 clean sheets, tied for the most in Serie A. Match data shows 25 starts, 67 saves, 12 clean sheets, and just 19 goals conceded. Como's press doesn't look like run until you die. It looks like a press with rules, spacing, cover shadows, and triggers. Team profiles rate them strongly across possession and pressing dimensions compared to top teams. So even when they push up, it doesn't feel suicidal. It feels coached. First, the Atalanta game, domination without the reward. This is the match that exposed their ceiling and their control. Against Atalanta, Como had 79.3% possession, 28 shot attempts, and still finished 0-0. Match analysis added the deeper punchline. It was rated at 5.2 for expected goals, one of the most extreme how did you not score matches in Serie A shutout history. And weirdly, that draw made them scarier, not less, because it proved the system can generate overwhelming pressure, even when finishing fails. Then came the Coppa Italia quarter-final against Napoli, the night that separated fun project from real contender. Napoli 1-1 Como, and Como advanced 7-6 on penalties. Knockout football is where inexperienced teams usually abandon their principles. Como didn't. They survived the emotional swings, stayed in the game, and executed in the most brutal phase, the shootout. Como's statistical profile matches a European contender more than a survival side. Top possession in the league, positive expected goals differential, elite concession numbers, clean sheet volume, and big game resilience. That's not a streak, that's a model. Let's be honest, when a smaller club goes to Turin and wins 2-0, the default story is always the same. Juventus were poor. It was one of those days, smash and grab, but Como didn't win this emotionally. They won it spatially. And that's the whole point of Febregas Como. They don't chase moments. They manufacture them. Match reports are clear. Juventus 0-2. Como with goals from Mergim Vojvoda in the 11th minute and Maxence Cacaret in the 61st. And here's the part that should make you pause. The raw event count wasn't crazy. Possession was close. 52.1% Juve, 47.9% Como, and shots were level at 11-11. So how did Como control a match that looks even on paper? Because paper doesn't show you the geometry. Como Como may be listed as a 4-3-3, but in possession they consistently reshape into a positional 3-2. One fullback tucks in or holds a conservative lane, the other provides width higher, the 6 and 1-8 form the two-man control panel, and the back line stays 3 across to protect against counters. That's rest defense, your defensive insurance policy already set before you take risks. This is why Como can commit numbers forward without looking naive. It's built into the structure. Tactical analysis has highlighted Como's controlled build-up and space exploitation principles under Fabregas, rather than chaotic possession for possession's sake. Against Juventus, that mattered because Juve couldn't get the cheap transition moments that usually swing games. One interception, one open sprint, one panic foul. Como simply didn't offer those gifts. Now the engine room. When Como are at their best, the midfield isn't about running harder. It's about always having the next pass available. That's the Perrone and Da Cunha layer. One stays available behind pressure, one supports beside pressure, and together they keep Como playing through the middle without gambling. Season profiling of Como repeatedly points to the club's clarity of identity and the consistency of key midfield pieces in keeping their football stable even under stress. And here's why that hurt Juventus. Instead of Como playing into Juve's press like a trapped team, Como kept finding the release pass that resets the entire phase. So Juve weren't pressing, they were chasing shapes. Fabregas teams always need one thing: a player who lives in that uncomfortable space between midfield and defense, the zone where defenders hesitate and midfielders panic. That's Nico Paz's job description. Even when he's not scoring, he's doing something more damaging. Dragging a holding midfielder out of position, pinning a centre-back with his body orientation, and receiving on the half-turn while forcing emergency rotations. Tactical observers have described him as Como's lockpicker, the player who turns structured possession into final third incision. And once you have a lockpicker, your possession stops being safe. It becomes threatening. Here's the part people miss. Como's defending starts with their attacking shape. They bait you into predictable outlets, then pounce on your next touch. Match data reveals a huge tell. Como rank extremely high for high turnovers and pressed sequences in Serie A this season. Basically, they win the ball back in advanced zones more than most teams. That's not random intensity, that's a coach trap. Typical trigger chain: force the ball wide where angles shrink, lock the receiver's forward passing lane with a cover shadow, collapse with a coordinated jump from the near side 8 and winger. Win the ball where the next pass is already an attacking action. So even if Juventus had the ball, they often had it in the wrong places, wide, facing their own goal, with Como already leaning into the duel. This is where the 2-0 starts to look engineered. First, forced wide circulation. Como's defensive spacing encourages opponents to go wide, not because Como are passive, but because their confident wide possession is low value unless you can break the next line. So Juventus were pushed toward the wings, toward longer phases, toward slower tempo, exactly where a systems team wants you. Second, midfield isolation. Once the ball goes wide, Como's midfield line stays compact and connected, meaning Juventus's central creators are starved of clean receptions. And this is the trap. When central options disappear, teams either recycle or force a risky pass. Como love both outcomes. Third, second phase punishment. And when the moment arrives, a loose clearance, a half-won duel, a second ball, Como are already positioned to strike because the 3-2 rest defense keeps them balanced. That's how a goal can come without the match feeling like chaos. And remember, match reports show an even shot count at 11-11. That's classic spatial dominance. You can allow the same quantity of shots while controlling the quality, timing, and game state around them. Because none of this depends on one wonder goal. It's built on stable build-up shapes with 3-2 rest defense, midfield spacing that resists pressure, a between-lines receiver to convert possession into penetration, and a pressing model that produces high turnovers by design. That's why the Juventus win matters. Not because it was shocking, but because it looked like the same Como patterns, simply executed against a bigger badge. Como don't dominate emotionally, they dominate spatially. And once a team can do that that away at Juventus, the question shifts from can they stay up to something much sharper. How many teams in this league can actually stop a system that already knows where the next advantage will appear? Here's the part that should really worry Serie A. This isn't a miracle run built on veterans peaking at the right time. It's profile-based construction. Under Cesc Fàbregas, Como 1907 haven't recruited for chaos. They've recruited for comfort, specifically comfort on the ball. Look at the spine. Nico Paz, technical between lines operator. Maxence Scarier, press-resistant, short-passing controller. Maximo Perrone, positional intelligence over physical dominance. A goalkeeper in jean boots, comfortable initiating build-up. These aren't box-to-box athletes first. They're decision-makers first. That's deliberate. Como aren't signing names to sell shirts. They're signing players who can operate inside. A 3-2 build-up structure, who understand spacing, who don't panic when pressed. The data backs it. They lead Serie A in possession at roughly 61% and sit among the best for positive expected goals differential, plus 17 after 26 matches. That doesn't happen if your midfield recruitment is random. This is tactical compatibility scouting. And it's scalable. The core is young, mid-20s profile, high development ceiling, resale value intact. That matters financially and competitively. Young players improve within structure, and structured improvement compounds. So while traditional giants refresh aging cores, Como are still climbing their development curve. This isn't peak form. It's phase 2. Remember where Fabregas started? Youth coaching. That wasn't cosmetic. It means the academy and first team speak the same football language. Positional discipline, scanning habits, patience in build-up. When identity flows downward, recruitment becomes easier. You're not guessing what fits. You already know. And that's how projects scale without collapsing under their own success. So now the conversation changes. It's no longer, are Como good? The table, the possession numbers, the Juventus result, they've answered that. The real question is, what happens if they add 2 more pieces to this system? 1 more elite winger who thrives in wide isolation moments. 1 more defender comfortable stepping into midfield. Because if a 45-point top 6 Como can already control games against Juventus, what does phase 3 look like? European qualification isn't fantasy anymore. It's mathematical. And if they finish inside those places, Fabregas doesn't just become a promising coach. He becomes a priority target. And here's the uncomfortable truth for the league. The longer opponents treat Como like a good story instead of a structural threat, the more ground they'll lose. This wasn't a shock result. It was a system announcing itself.